Well, good afternoon and welcome to the second installment of Faith in Consciousness. I want to thank all of you who have watched the previous video and have shared it with so many people. Thank you for all of you who gave us a thumbs up and subscribed. And I hope that those of you who watched the video today, if you haven't watched the previous one, that you are encouraged to do so and that you continue to share this video series with people that you feel are going to truly benefit from it. If you feel that you've benefited from it, if it's been a blessing to you and you haven't subscribed yet, please do. And give us a thumbs up as well. It's important for us to let the YouTube algorithm know that the more that people are subscribing and the more that people are giving the thumbs up, that it becomes more accessible to people throughout the YouTube universe. And we want to make sure that you also feel free to share it with anyone that you believe is going to really benefit from this type of content. You know, Faith in Consciousness, as I mentioned before, and I thank all of you who have been so much a part of the influence and the encouragement to finally get this program going. I want to remind you that faith is about not having all the answers, but it's knowing how to live with the questions. And consciousness is that vibrant, vivid awareness of every single moment that we're on this planet, and to be fully authentic and engaged in that moment, giving the fullness of who we are so that we can extract the fullness of that moment. And that allows us to live rich quality of lives that really makes such a difference when we look at what it means to be human. And of course, the idea here is not just that we want to fix something, but it's about being transformed, becoming fully and becoming as evolved as possible. You know, really being able to be, highly evolved beings, that we're able to not just understand why we go through things, but find meaning in those trials and tribulations, to have emotional intelligence, to have wisdom, and to be able to also know how to practically engage that wisdom and that emotional intelligence so that we're not just being benefited, but that we're able to be a blessing in the lives of other people. And they in turn are a blessing to other people. And we cause this beautiful concentric circle that just continues to touch other lives. And that at the end of the day is what we desire. Because as we are changed, as we are transformed, as we become highly evolved, and as we begin to enjoy a more meaningful quality of life, we know that others are going to as well. Our relationships are going to be richer, they're going to be more deep, they're going to be more profound experiences of joy, and we're also going to find such a sense of purpose within ourselves, because at the end of the day, I want all of you to reconnect with the divinity within you, reconnect with the beauty that you are as a human being, with the sacredness of your life. And you may not think that this is something that is really going to be beneficial, but it is, it truly is. And that's what I want all of you to be able to extract and benefit from this time together. So today we're going to continue with the previous video. And as all of you remember, this last video was an introduction to patterns. Well, today what we're going to do is we're going to talk about how these patterns can be in some way or another, right, identified, how they can be also, once we've made the changes, once we have been able to undo those patterns, how can we ensure that those patterns are kept in check? How we can work on them, how can we improve on them? When we fall a little bit behind, how can we recuperate and be available once again so that we're able to do whatever it is that we need to do, learning as we go along to really become that best version of ourselves. So the first thing we want to keep in mind is that these 5 aspects that we're going to be looking at this afternoon all are centered in the core of our personality, which is the self. And so once we're able to determine how these 5 interact with each other, as we learn in the next video next week, how exactly to go about unpacking and how to dismantle those aversive, ineffective habits that we've been kind of repeating over and over and over again, I want to first tell you how you now prepare. So once we teach you how to unpack those habits, you'll already have in place these 5 aspects that will help you to self-regulate. And self-regulating is one of the key virtues and principles and characteristics of highly evolved beings. Self-regulating, that is crucial, because that means that you become your own independent source of monitoring, of gauging, of recalibrating, and of improving and becoming more effective and efficient. So the very first thing we need to keep in mind is to understand our self-esteem. And our self-esteem begins often as a very simplistic perspective of comparison. That's what we're doing. You know, when we were much younger, very, very early on, before we maybe got to kindergarten, we were told maybe by our family members that we were like the fastest runners out there. We were gazelles. And then when we started school, we realized that there's a kid who's so much faster than us, and we come back home brokenhearted because we realize that actually there's someone faster than us. So we already start this idea of comparing ourselves with other people, and it begins to dismantle our sense of esteem. It begins with academic esteem, self-esteem, so are we smart, are we dumb when we compare ourselves to other people? Then it goes into the social. Are we friendlier than others? Do people attract and do people gravitate to us more so than in others, or do others and we're pretty much, marginalized or just set off at a distance, or people aloof around us, right? And then of course the personal one. Am I handsome? Am I not? Am I beautiful? Am I not? Am I friendly? Am I not? Am I loved by my parents? Am I not? Am I the black sheep? Am I not? These kinds of things ultimately give us a general perspective of assessment of who we are based on comparison. The second one, of course, is self-disclosure. And self-disclosure is important because what self-disclosure does is that it's really about being as authentic, as genuine as we can be with ourselves about those areas that are the good, the bad, and the ugly. We have the tendency to say that we know ourselves. Sometimes we may not say that, but sometimes we may agree with ourselves that we kind of know a lot about ourselves, but there are things about us that we even refuse to talk ourselves with. We really don't want to do that. We don't want to talk to ourselves about who knows what. But it's important that if we really, really want to know the areas where we need to change, the areas we need to improve upon, the areas that we really need to think about strongly about why we do what we do, we need to exercise self-disclosure. So as transparent as we can be, just put things out there to ourselves so that we know it's been called out, it's been put on the table in our minds and in our hearts. Now I know what I need to work with. But if we continue to set those things and hide those things and not ever really look at them or even acknowledge that they're there, then we're going to lie to ourselves. We're going to continue to tell ourselves that we're, being honest with ourselves when we're not. We're going to continue to tell ourselves and others, yeah, I'm very much aware of what I'm doing, but I'm not. I really don't know what I'm doing or why. So self-disclosure is very, very important, to be truthful with other people and with ourselves especially. Otherwise, true change cannot happen. True life-affirming change cannot happen if we're doing it veiling those areas that require the most amount of work, right? And we should do it with grace. We shouldn't do it with judgment. We should do it with honesty, knowing that the reason why we're doing it is so we can become the better version of ourselves. So we need to applaud that. It takes an incredible amount of courage and backbone to do that. So we shouldn't be shooting that down. But by the same token, we shouldn't be avoiding it, right? The next one is self-awareness. Be mindful of the fact that if I am willing to work on something, then I am aware of that work that needs to be done. And I'm aware as I'm putting it into action. But I'm also aware at the moment. I'm giving the fullness of who I am to this moment right now. So as I'm doing this, this is what I'm doing. I'm not thinking about anything else in my periphery or in my life. This is what I'm doing right now with you, the viewer, right? And as you're watching, this is what you're doing. You're watching, you're listening, you're processing, you're asking yourself some questions that are popping up as you're listening to me. As you're taking a walk, that's what you're doing. You're taking a walk, right? It's about being authentic in every single area, category of experience. And that's so true, especially when we want to undo those, aversive, ineffective habits, to be aware that we're doing it, to be aware of why we're doing it. And then when we start employing those new habits or those new ways of thinking and regulating that emotion, we're able to be aware of when we need a little bit more tweaking, or aware of those triggers, aware of what's going on. And can you see how, self-disclosure and awareness work together? Think of it as, being able to know the layout of the land. The more information that I know and the more aware I am of that information, then I can navigate through the landmines of emotional triggers, those emotional mines, all of those things that can potentially set me back. Now I'm aware of them because I have the self-disclosure, and so I can now know why my esteem is constantly improving, or why there's a drop in it, and where it came from, so I can work on it, so I can increase my esteem, I can increase my sense of trust within myself, which is what self-disclosure is all about, and then I can be aware of that. And then, of course, that leads to being aware of schemas, self-schemas. The schemas are the way that we produce the patterns that we were talking about last week and we're talking about this week. That's what they are. They're schemas. What's a schema? Now, some of you may remember from your psychology class an individual by the name of Lev Vygotsky, and also someone by the name of Jean Piaget. But Jean Piaget was really the one who said that when we're children, early on in the crib, we start developing what we call schemas. Now, some schemas, like the throwing schema, begins by trial and error. We may be in the crib and just pick up a rattle and throw it, and that would be just trial. And all of a sudden, when we see what we did, we might, next time they put that rattle back into the crib, we might pick it up and throw with a little bit more intentionality. Now, eventually, that throwing scheme could lead that child one day to be a Major League Baseball pitcher. On the other hand, that throwing scheme can also be something that we'll just use as we play catch with friends and family. Same thing with learning the cutting schema. That cutting schema is something that we can learn and eventually become artists or maybe even surgeons. But by the same token, it may be something that we just use to get some gifts ready for a birthday party or for a holiday. The reality is that these schemas begin as very simple trial and error experiences often. Sometimes they begin as the first experience of something that we went through, and they then become, in essence, the foundation for the evolution of that schema. So can you imagine that if an experience is not a positive one, or if an experience or a schema has been built upon a toxic situation or an uncertain one, or one that doesn't provide a lot of safety or a lot of trust, over the course of time, that schema is going to acquire more and more sophisticated, complex characteristics, making it harder and harder to unlearn. Can we? We can. We definitely can. But I want you to realize the nature of how patterns are sophisticated. Patterns are complex. Patterns are complicated things. And so it's not an overnight fix. And that's the reason why we need to be aware of those patterns. We need to be aware of why those patterns are there, where those patterns came from, their origin, and that will help us to be able to not only nip them in the bud, but also understand how we can dismantle them. But remember, understanding that the actions have a thought. The thought is the foundation. The action is the embodiment of that thought, as we learned last week, and that thought is rooted in emotion. This is why it's important to know the schemas. We'll talk more about that next time. And the last thing is self-monitoring. Self-monitoring is when we really become the overseer. We become the oversight and supervisor of our change, of our actions. It's when we become empowered to be able to follow the schemas, see what they are, when we change them, be able to regulate and notice and monitor those new ones, be able to be aware when we're falling back into the old patterns, being able to self-disclose, hey, listen, I'm falling back in my old pattern. It's time for me to get back into my rhythm, that self-disclosure, and then being able to also understand that through that, I'm going to start sensing an increase in my confidence, an increase in my sense of esteem, and overall, I'm going to notice that I'm going to be evolving. So again, self-regulation is the key characteristic of highly evolved people. And self-regulation happens when I'm able to exercise self-monitoring, where I can provide the oversight in my life, where I can be the supervisor of my life, where I can be the boss of my life, that I'm able to see the things that I need to change and see them as an opportunity, not as a sign of failure. See them as an opportunity for me to become the best version of me. And as I become more and more, proficient in my self-monitoring, it's going to be easier for me to make it a second habit, a second nature, if you will, a habit of the heart. And that's what I want us to do, to make transformation, to make change, not this overburdening exercise, but really something that becomes a habit of the heart. It becomes second nature. It becomes something that we just do. And as we just do it, it actually becomes something that we look forward to, because we've seen the evidence, we've seen the results, we've seen the ramifications of becoming the best version of ourselves. And I want to thank all of you who've reached out and who have let me know that, some of you are going through some challenging times, and that the video has come at an ideal moment where it's helped you to kind of think about some of the things that you need improvement on, or some of those areas of your life that you've been aware of. You may have self-disclosed, but you may not have really known how to go about, making those more concrete, life-affirming changes. And so I hope that this video gives you those 5 tools, which I want to review really quickly. Remember, self-esteem. We start off with where are we in our level of confidence and our level of self-image. Then we go to self-disclosure, where we talk about ourselves, to ourselves, about those areas that we know have been impediments to that overall feeling of confidence, that sense of who we are, that has in some way been an obstacle. It's sabotaged our overall sense of evaluation of ourselves, where we've been highly critical, very much about comparing ourselves to others. And of course, then comes self-awareness, right? Self-awareness is where we are clear, we are mindful, we're present, authentically in the process of our disclosure and the acknowledgement of where we are in our levels of esteem, but then we also are aware of when we start the process of change, when we're falling off to the side, when we're falling back to the old patterns, and so that we can keep ourselves honest, right? Working in conjunction with what? With self-disclosure. And then that leads to us being able to be aware of what are those patterns we need to change through self-schema. And once we're aware of what are those patterns we need to change, we're then able to know what are the patterns we need to introduce and replace and substitute the old ones that didn't work. And we're also able to understand why in the first place did those ineffective, and aversive patterns come into play in the first time. Why did we adopt them in the first place? And then finally, self-monitoring, the ability for us to provide the oversight, the supervision, to be our own boss, to be able to know that we employ self-regulation as when we notice ourselves kind of falling off, going back to the old pattern, we can stop ourselves and maybe say, forgive me, I didn't mean that. I know that I need to do this now, to ourselves and to others. And also that shows vulnerability, it shows confidence, it also shows authenticity to that commitment of evolving. And at the end of the day, that's what we want. We all want to evolve, become the best version of ourselves for ourselves and for others, because you deserve it. You deserve to be the best version of you. You deserve to be a person that is in tune with your sacred personhood, with your sacred self, with the divinity inside of you. And so I hope that this video has been a blessing to you, and to those of you who share it, thank you. Please subscribe, give me a thumbs up, and next week we'll come back and talk really now about how to dismantle the habit. Peace. I wish you the best. And again, thank you so much for supporting this project, and I look forward to hearing from you. Take care. Bye-bye.